Friends, very grateful to be gathered together with you in the Hall of Honor. My name is Sheila Malcolmson. I'm the Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, and honored to be here on the territory of the Algonquin-speaking people, the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations. We are really happy to be here to celebrate and support the not-for-profit community sector. We have a lot of guests here from all over the province. Can you please put your hands up high if you are in service in the not-for-profit sector? Look at you all. You are working hard to make this province better for everyone, and you're doing such important and such hard work in every corner of the province and every corner of community. And so we're especially glad that you can take some of your time out today to be with us, allow us to celebrate you and speak to you. Can I also ask members of the legislature that are here, put your hands up, because you're all part of the advocacy team as well. Thank you. Yeah. So we've got a really nice lineup. We have a couple of special guests who are here to share their stories. Ada Mawson and Barb Good. You'll meet them in a minute. It will be Premier David Eby, who helps shepherd that conversation, along with Megan Dykman, who's our Parliamentary Secretary for the community development and not-for-profit sector. She and her office champion the cause of not-for-profits in every corner of our government. And so she's got big shoes to fill. And we had a really lovely conversation this morning with a number of the not-for-profits that are delivering vital service in partnership, and along with them came our Attorney General, Nikki Sharma, who had Megan Dykman's role before her as the champion for the not-for-profit sector. So it was really nice to see her. She's so connected to that grassroots work. Also in the room and in the conversation this morning, some of the other not-for-profits that really help us deliver funding directly and quickly. Kevin McCord of Vancouver Foundation and Zara Eshmael of Vantage Point. I want to give a particular thanks and recognition to today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Premier Eby to take us into our conversation.
Thank you so much, Sheila, and thanks for your work on this file. And it's great to see everybody. Wonderful to see you here on Lekwungen-speaking people's territory. And thank you for joining us here today. It's a really exciting day for those of us who are gathered here. And despite the decorations, it's not Halloween, right? We're celebrating something else today. But it is a good reminder to me, I have to pick up the candy for our house because Kaylee is a family doctor. And if I don't get the candy, the kids just get helpful tips from Dr. Lynch about how to reduce your sugar consumption, so I don't want to be the first premier toilet papered out of office. The day that we're celebrating today, Megan's going to share a little bit more about what that's about briefly, but I wanted to say, in this period in our province right now, a lot of people are struggling. It's issues around housing, it's issues around affordability generally, access to food. Sometimes people just need an extra helping hand generally. And the nonprofit sector has been so key in this province to supporting people through really lean times. And your work has only become more important in terms of supporting British Columbians. And we want to ensure that government is supporting you and recognizing the work that the nonprofit sector does in supporting British Columbians around these really important issues. It makes sense that when people are struggling and nonprofit organizations are showing up for people in our province, that the government shows up and supports nonprofit organizations in turn, which is why I'm so happy to announce that today we're announcing $60 million to strengthen the capacity of nonprofit organizations in British Columbia. So this money is to make sure that you have the resources you need to be able to continue to deliver for British Columbians on those critical issues, people who are sick, people who are looking for a place to live, people who are looking for food, people who are struggling with a disability and need support. There are so many different ways that nonprofits show up for British Columbians. Your energy and your creativity and your ability to deliver for British Columbians quickly and effectively is so important. And I'm very grateful for it, and I hope that you're able to continue to not just deliver the work that you have been doing, but continue to expand that work to meet the needs of British Columbians as they evolve right now. Just before I wrap up, I want to recognize Nikki Sharma, who's in the front row here. She used to be the Parliamentary Secretary with the responsibility for the nonprofit sector and did a lot of work with your sector. I want to recognize that work before she became Attorney General. Thank you, Nikki. And we have a new parliamentary, well, not so new, been a year now, hustling out there. Parliamentary Secretary responsible for the nonprofit sector, Megan Dykeman, to whom I'm going to pass the mic now, metaphorically, and so that she can share why this is a big and important day for us.
Oh, thank you so much, Premier Eby. This is such an exciting day. Nonprofits, as you mentioned, are vital to the people and the communities in this province. And in my role over the past year as Parliamentary Secretary for Community Development and Nonprofits, I've seen firsthand how the work that they do helps people overcome challenges and make a difference in the lives of so many families. I've also heard through their advocacy about the need for stable funding and recognition of the importance of our partnership and the pivotal role that they play in delivering vital services to British Columbians, often the most vulnerable people in our province. That's why, in addition to the $60 million that the Premier announced today, I am absolutely thrilled to announce that we are proclaiming that October 30th shall be known as Nonprofit Recognition Day. Today, we are celebrating nonprofits and the important work that they do. And they certainly do, as the Premier talked about, some of the most important work in our province. So we are now going to turn to our first guest. We are joined today by Barb Good, whose life was transformed by the Plan community. Thank you, Barb, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I just wanted to go over a few things. And I recently sold my apartment in Burnaby and moved to a new place where I can get more support as I'm getting older and need more help with things. It was a lot of work, but it all went well, and I'm glad I did it. My friends and family were there to help me every step of the way. Actually, my friends and family and many amazing nonprofit groups have helped me to live independently since I was in my 20s. When I was younger and still living at home, I told my parents I wanted to move out, just like my brother had. Since I have a disability, my parents didn't know what was possible. So my dad called the local nonprofit association for some help and support. Since then, I've been involved in many nonprofit organizations. Some I received support from, some I helped to create, some I consult for, and all of them are a big part of my life. I'm so glad the government is giving more support to nonprofit organizations. Plan Lifetime Advocacy Networks, or PLAN for short, helps to ensure that all people can live a good and safe life and be included in the community. We help people to build networks of friends and people who care about us and helps us to make plans for our future needs as we and our family members age. I am the vice chair on the board of PLAN. PLAN and many of the nonprofit organizations I am involved in are grateful for the support of the government and the Vancouver Foundation. Thank you.
Thanks, Barb. That was wonderful.
It was really inspiring to hear your story, and we were glad that you were able to find a better place to live through Plan. Thank you for coming out and talking to us about how the work of nonprofits has helped transform your life. We are very fortunate today to have another story here to share, and I would like to welcome Ada Mawson. We are looking forward to hearing about your experience with Indigenize.
Sure. Hello. Well, I just want to say thank you. It's a beautiful opportunity to be able to speak about the nonprofit. I was fortunate enough to be involved in the Indigenize 13 Moons, which is a First Nation women's leadership training program. And at first when I saw the email, I went, I don't think so. That's not for me. And through my life, people have said, Ada, you're a leader. You're a leader. And I said, no, I'm just really good at what I do. And then people kept saying, no, you should take this. You should take this. And I went, okay. So I did. And here I am. But it's not that. It was recognizing the leadership skills I had within myself and recognizing the ladies that I met along the way. We as women have so much to give, and we have so much leadership within inside of us. And sometimes we don't even know that we have it. And we need other people to show us that. So with the 13 Moons, it helped me recognize I do have some leadership skills and I have a lot to offer. And therefore, I started my own early learning consulting business, right? So I support our First Nations in pretty much anything and everything to do with childcare. A nation will say, Ada, we need this, we want that, we want a licensed childcare program, we want it to be culturally relevant and safe. Okay, let's sit down and let's do the work. So I'm meeting the communities exactly where they're at and putting a First Nations lens on the work that I do. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic, Ada. Thanks for your work.
Well, that is such an inspiring story. Thank you for sharing that with us and how you were able to receive training through a nonprofit and then put that experience that you gained into work to create a whole new business. Thank you so much for that story.
Thank you.
Oh, welcome.
Thank you.
Yes. You're here to share a story with us too.
Yes, my name is Maurice Earl, and I've been part of nonprofits for most of my life, really touching on the Black community and marginalized communities. And I am now here to representing Ethos Lab, this fantastic organization. I'm on the board of directors, and this organization is a nonprofit based in Vancouver, and we pretty much specialize on trying to build community hubs all around towards innovation in STEAM. So STEAM, I think everybody understands what STEAM is: science, technology, engineering, applied arts, and math. And we want to bring it to kids in the community from grade 5, so starting like around 10 years old, till grade 12. And we have a lot of success. We have connected with EA Sports and Microsoft and Emily Carr and some other organizations. And it is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful organization that is really providing these skills for the Black community and also girls, for just making sure they can, have the proper foundation to get into university, colleges, and understand, that they have this innovation and opportunities that a lot of people like my age didn't have. So that's our organization. And I'd like to also thank the Vancouver Foundation, and like thank for inviting us as well, and just keep on going with nonprofits. Nonprofits are very, very important. So important that I couldn't just stick with one. I have multiple under my belt. So just keep on giving nonprofits. Thank you very much for that infusion. We really appreciate it. That's going to help a lot.
Thanks, Maury. Fantastic. You can really see the diversity of the work that nonprofits do in British Columbia, from education, supporting people with disabilities, starting Indigenous businesses, helping women with identify their leadership skills. Really, the sky's the limit in terms of the work that nonprofits do, and we're so grateful for all of it.
It was wonderful to hear about the transformative work that's being done by so many nonprofits throughout British Columbia, and really do appreciate hearing these stories, hearing stories about people like Barb and Ada and the millions of others in our province who are able to lead better lives because of the partnerships that we have with nonprofits. And that's why we're supporting the nonprofit sector through this funding, and the recognition of the fact that BC's nonprofits are helping raise our quality of life and helping us build a stronger British Columbia.
What a lineup, right? So grateful to the voices here that have shared their stories and give us just a flavor of the way that people's lives are changed for the better when we invest in people and when not-for-profits put their amazing power of their organization, their commitment, their connection to the grassroots. We're so reliant on that. We want to make British Columbia better. We want to invest in people. We cannot do it without the partnership that's evidenced here in the room. And that includes the storytelling. So thank you both to Barb and to Ada and Friend. Thank you for telling us, because that's our superpower too, right? We don't cut through and penetrate and have that give people hope about what we can do when we build a better BC until we hear from people that have done the work and been there. So with that, and with gratitude to all the groups doing the work, those at home who are doing the work, I'm going to turn it over to Premier Eby to talk with media about what this means for British Columbians. Thank you, everybody, so much.
Thanks for joining us today. There are a number of members of the media here in person. I'm going to remind everybody to be limited to one question and one follow-up. We're going to begin with Richard Zussman from Global News. Go ahead, Richard.
Premier, the work nonprofits do obviously wide-ranging. Are you worried that with the growing cost of living, impacts that people are having on their lives, that the reliance on some of those services will become greater? And is there any consideration being given to changing the way that nonprofits are funded in terms of more stability long-term?
Yeah, thanks, Richard. We know that British Columbians are struggling right now, and we see that there's increased demand on nonprofits as a result. Most recently, we saw data federally that showed increased demand on food banks in British Columbia. I don't take any comfort from the fact that our numbers were better than other provinces. The demand is huge. And people don't choose to go to a food bank except out of desperation. And so those numbers going up is a huge source of concern for me. And we know we'll be leaning heavily on the nonprofit sector. We also have to, at the government level, address systemic issues that lead people to have to go to food banks and make sure that they're supported in different ways. So today's announcement is certainly recognition that people are leaning more heavily on nonprofits than ever before, but also recognition of the innovation and the creativity of nonprofits in delivering services in ways that respond to the unique community frontline needs. The fact that they can be more flexible, the fact that they can be more accommodating of whatever's happening in the local community is a very important feature of nonprofit service delivery that makes it more relevant for the British Columbians who depend on them.
And Richard, do you have a follow-up question?
The Save Our Streets Coalition launched this morning in Vancouver, an organization of people from across BC saying your government is not doing enough to prevent repeat theft, repeat vandalism, leading to people being back on the streets after being arrested for stealing, in some cases, thousands of dollars worth of goods. Are you willing to sit down with this group and have a conversation around what else can be done to help support those businesses?
Yeah, I certainly welcome the work of businesses to raise the profile of this issue. We have been working hard with the federal government to get them to change some of the rules that they put in place around bail to recognize the issue of particularly repeat violent offenders. Here in British Columbia, recognizing that many of these offenses are driven by mental health and addiction issues, finding ways to intervene people who are in a cycle of criminality through our repeat offender programming. We have now 300 people across the province that are being monitored and supported in terms of trying to get between them and this cycle of criminal activity that's causing such difficulty. The reason why I particularly welcome this group coming together is despite the fact that the legislation is passed Parliament federally, it's stuck at the Senate. We went to Ottawa to individually lobby senators to tell them how important these rule changes were, to ensure that the public continues to have confidence in the criminal justice system, and it has not passed yet. So I'm looking forward to meeting with them and having those conversations about what other gaps have they identified where we can do better work. We've expanded the CAR program where there's a mental health worker with police. We've expanded a peer program where people struggling with mental health issues are met by peers, which free up police to deal with criminal activity. We've ensured that our directions to prosecutors reflect the public's expectations. We're expanding access to housing, which we think is a significant driver when people are living outside of some of this activity. But if this group has some other suggestions for us, I'm happy to hear them.
Our next question will come from Rob Buffum from CTV News. Go ahead, Rob.
Hi, Premier. I wanted to get your reaction to the federal government announcing that they were going to provide subsidies for heat pumps. Is your government going to campaign for those same subsidies to be extended to British Columbians? And also, are you going to provide the same relief for people heating their homes with oil?
Yeah, I think like many Canadians, I was surprised by the announcement made by the federal government on Thursday that they were going to pay for heat pumps in Nova Scotia, but not in British Columbia. I think at a minimum, fairness demands equal treatment of British Columbians. People struggling with affordability around home heating face the same struggles in BC as in Nova Scotia. It's not a distinct or different struggle. And so if the federal government is going to do this work, they need to do it in an equitable way across Canada. Here in British Columbia, we believe very firmly that part of our climate solution includes recognizing that carbon has a price, but that doesn't mean that we don't recognize the affordability impacts, and that's why we work to support British Columbians to ensure that they are recognized when they have to pay extra in their low-income people. And so the federal government needs to work with us on this. We've been, frankly, lobbying them for months to get this kind of recognition. So my expectation is that they will meet us in delivering that program for British Columbians just like they do Nova Scotians.
Rob, do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, also on the carbon tax, will your government provide the same relief for people who are heating their homes with oil as the federal government is providing for those folks who they impose the carbon tax on? And also, I guess I'm hoping to get your reaction. Pierre Poilievre has said if his government's elected, which at the moment, if the polls prove true, they will be, he'd scrap the carbon tax. What would you do in BC if that happens?
Well, British Columbians have supported carbon tax for a long time as part of a strategy to fight climate change. And here in British Columbia, and in particular under our administration, we've expanded the use of various tax credit and rebate programs for low-income people to support them, recognizing that we want people to switch from home heating oil to cleaner sources of heat and cooling, but also recognizing that we don't want people to face increased poverty as a result. There are different ways that we can maintain our high standards around carbon pollution, but also support people with affordability. And that's where our government is focused. And that's where, frankly, I think the federal government should be focused as well. I was disappointed by the direction that really focused on protecting a particular type of heating rather than protecting people, which is where they should be focused.
Our next question will come from Emily Vance from CBC News. Go ahead, Emily.
Thank you, Premier. So the province-wide coalition calling itself Save Our Streets, they're saying that violent crime, vandalism, and theft has passed a tipping point in many communities, and they say people no longer feel safe. Do you agree with that assertion, and why or why not?
Well, I've certainly been concerned post-pandemic, as people have across Canada, with an increase in two different types of issue. One is visible street disorder, people struggling with mental health and addiction issues in the public square in cities across Canada and down the west coast of the United States. British Columbia, no exception. And the second is an increase in random violent attacks, particularly in Vancouver, which led us to do advocacy work with the federal government. Certainly public safety has been one of my priorities since being sworn in, to ensure that we're addressing this issue as proactively as possible. We worked with the province of Ontario, in fact, to go to the federal government to push them to make those necessary reforms. We've instituted a number of different programs to intervene with people who are struggling in the streets. We've set rules around the public use of hard drugs to ensure that people are encouraged to use at safe consumption sites instead of in parks, playgrounds, doorways of businesses and bus stops. If there's more that we can do, I want to hear about it from this group. I look forward to working with them because I really think that the only way we're going to get our hands around this is by working together.
Do you have a follow-up question, Emily?
Yes, I do. And how do you balance the priorities of, making sure that the criminal justice system is functioning the way it should be with the need to support people that may be committing crimes out of desperation?
Well, the goal of our government continues to be to intervene in a way that supports people struggling with mental health, addiction, and homelessness by ensuring that we're delivering housing. Record housing program for our province to a level this province hasn't seen before as we try to catch up from years of underinvestment. New programs, innovative programs where peers, people with lived mental health experience, respond to a call now in North Vancouver where someone's struggling with mental health issues and that person is met by a peer instead of by a police officer, and that frees up the police officers to focus on crime. But we also recognize that we need to ensure that people have confidence in both the justice system, which is why we worked with the federal government on this, as well as that there are sufficient police to respond to any issues in community, which is why we ensured that the RCMP were adequately funded, especially in rural communities. So it really is an issue that takes looking at it from every angle and going after every angle to address it. We believe we've done that, and if this group has additional suggestions, I look forward to hearing them.
Next question will come from Katie DeRosa from Vancouver Sun. Go ahead, Katie.
The federal bail reform legislation is before the Senate and committee stage, and the Attorney General Sharma was questioned by some senators who either said that the legislation was a rush job, they said that it could disproportionately harm Indigenous people and other marginalized people in the justice system. Are you concerned the legislation could fail, and how does that impact BC's bail system?
Well, I've never been more sympathetic to the federal NDP's suggestion that the Senate be abolished. I mean, how absolutely out of touch must senators be to not understand the grievous and serious public safety issues of releasing someone who has committed multiple violent offenses back into community. Indigenous people in particular are the most likely to be the victim of a violent offense. And the unwillingness of these senators to open their eyes and their ears to the calls from across the country to fix this quickly is profoundly disappointing to me and frankly disturbing.
Katie, do you have a follow-up question?
On Friday, the Metro Vancouver Board voted to triple the development cost charges. That was a letter of concern sent by Minister Sean Fraser saying that they shouldn't do that. He's basically seems to be suggesting that the housing accelerator funding could be at risk. Obviously, that's necessary for housing for municipalities to meet their housing targets. So how do you respond to this tug of war between Minister Fraser and the Metro Board?
Well, for our provincial side of things, we're trying to get everybody working together in the same direction that British Columbians have directed to us, which is to deliver as much housing as possible, as quickly as possible, and bring those costs down. And you'll see that reflected in all of our initiatives, everything from opening units that are currently being used as short-term rentals to long-term renters, which is a necessary step, which our government voted for, the opposition voted against, as well as speeding up the construction of new housing, especially affordable housing. Many of the nonprofits in the room here today have affordable housing projects that they've seen tied up for extended periods in approval and public hearing processes in the middle of a housing emergency. For the relationship between the federal government and Metro Vancouver, I thought the federal minister's proposal was a good one. Take a pause for a year, see where the market's at, because we do need to build the rental housing that will be hit by these development cost charges. We're going to continue to support both the federal government and Metro Vancouver in coming to a constructive resolution to this, no pun intended, as quickly as possible.
Our next question will come from Les Lane from Times Columnist. Go ahead, Les.
Thanks. There was a lot of frustration and desperation at this SOS launch this morning, and they acknowledge, I think, that some of the various measures your government's taken, but one woman said they're still waiting for results, and they talk about doubling down on what we already know is failing. What are you going to, or is there any studies or analytical work underway to figure out if harm reduction in general and decriminalization specifically is working or making any difference?
Well, I think, for those seeking to tie the response to the toxic drug crisis, where almost 13,000 people in this province have died, to the issue of shoplifting in stores, just look at what's happening in other provinces. We have similar issues taking place in other provinces, including in Ontario, in Alberta. The National Retailers Association has pointed out that retail workers have been subject to violent attacks across Canada in escalating numbers. Down the West Coast, all the way down, and in New York City, this is a very live issue. So obviously, there is a broader issue taking place here. In terms of our response in British Columbia, we think we have to keep people alive, get them into treatment. We have $1 billion going into mental health and addiction treatment in the last budget to deliver for people on that front. And we think that's the way for people struggling with addiction who are also involved in criminality to fund those addictions, to get them the treatment they need to get better and rebuild their lives is the way forward. I met a guy named Tyson who was at a facility in Saanich run by our place, who said he was a broken man in a jail cell 5 months ago, and he's rebuilding his life and getting back out there. The nonprofits who are in this room today who are supporting, in that case it was our place, are providing services that change lives, get people out of jail, and get them building and working again in a way that's constructive for society, and we really think that's the way forward. There are individuals that need jail time, that need to be separated from community for the public safety, which is why we've done the work with the federal government as well. I think it's important for us to do all of this work.
Les, do you have a follow-up question?
I got the impression they're going to restart or re-emphasize the discussion about repeated violent offenders, and I'm wondering what else you could do to tackle that specific aspect of street disorder in general.
Yeah, we are focused on a number of different initiatives related to repeat violent offenders. One of the biggest challenges we face on this issue, despite the fact that a lot of the discussion is at the provincial level, is that the criminal code is a federal statute. It is a federal law, and which means that we have to work indirectly through the federal government to address that issue, including what happens in criminal courts. So it's a challenge, but that doesn't mean that we sit back. So for our side, on the provincial side of the ledger, those services that intervene and break that cycle of criminality are very important. Now, I know that Indigenous people in particular are disproportionately represented in the criminal justice system, and so one of the programs we've rolled out, designed by Indigenous people for Indigenous people, are the First Nations Justice Centres across the province, where people who are in contact with the criminal justice system, who self-identify as Indigenous, are met with wraparound services that intervene with them to support them in getting what they need to break that cycle of criminality. And so we're going to keep doing all of this work on our end. We need a strong federal partner as well, though, obviously, on this issue.
We have time for one more question. It's going to come from Wolf Deppner from Black Press. Go ahead, Wolf.
Thank you for taking my question. At the risk of playing up a certain narrative, we find ourselves back in the 1970s. A prime minister by the name of Trudeau is disadvantaging Western Canada at the expense of Eastern Canada. Following up on some of the questions from my colleagues, how would you describe BC's current state of relations with the federal government in light of some of the housing issues, in light of Thursday's announcement in light of the bail reform issue. How would you sort of headline relations between this province and Ottawa right now?
Yeah, the more things change, Wolf. I note that there was also an NDP premier named Dave at that time. I'll certainly acknowledge that the federal government hasn't shown up in BC yet in the way that I would hope that they would. And that's everything from our housing program, where we think, if they just use even the existing dollars they've committed to work with our programs more constructively, we could deliver more housing for British Columbians. Where, unfortunately, they didn't pass that criminal justice reform last session. They only passed it this session. The fact that they made that announcement on Thursday that was all about the East Coast and not at all about the other maritime provinces in Canada on the West Coast. There are certainly moments of frustration. I continue, because of individual and personal assurances by senior ministers in the federal government, to believe that they will turn a corner with us. I just hope it's sooner rather than later.
And Wolf, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, I do. Again, unrelated to today's event, but a question regarding yesterday's referendum in Surrey on Sikh independence, quote unquote. How do you think that referendum will impact relations between Canada and India, and how do you think what sort of pushback, blowback do you expect from yesterday's referendum to come to BC?
Yeah, let's wait for the bells to finish. On Saturday night, I was at the Indian Business Association gala, and was joined by many different leaders from the Indian diaspora, business owners and operators who rely on strong relationships between British Columbia and India to do their work, and who celebrate that. And my message to them was the same today, that the depth of the personal and cultural relationships between British Columbia and India are far greater than the dispute between federal governments right now, and that relationship will persevere, that the diversity of our province on Indigenous land, where immigrants have been welcomed for a long time, and South Asian immigrants for more than 100 years, means that our strength is in those personal relationships. I believe that relationship will persevere. Obviously, relations between the federal governments of India and Canada are at probably an all-time low or very close to that. And my hope is that we have justice for the murder in Surrey, Mr. Najjar, and that we are able to move on in our relationship with India and deepen those trades beyond just the interpersonal and cultural to economic and intergovernmental.
And that's all the time we have today for media questions. We're going to ask everybody who's a representative from the nonprofit sector to just join us at the front for a photo. Thank you for joining us today.